Okay, so Tom is a 4.5-year-old preschool boy, and he was in my room for 1.5 years. He had displayed a range of behaviours, from hyperarousal to dissociative behaviours. His hyperarousal behaviour involved problems with controlling his emotions and maintaining attention and connection with his peers. He would have extreme outbursts involving biting and spitting, yelling at the teachers and his peers. But then he also was quite withdrawn at times, didn't show much eye contact, was inattentive, and didn't really relate well to his peers. Tom's learning issues were, he had a range of developmental delays, and he was diagnosed with a global developmental delay. This is where he had a deficit in 2 or more areas, and these areas were cognition, in particular memory and attention, and also with language and speech and social and emotional development. We later found out that these delays were due to him being removed from his family when he was 18 months old, and he didn't have a secure attachment formed with his primary caregiver. I went to a training once where it was around children and trauma, and the facilitator had said that you should treat every child as if they have a disability. I thought this was really important to mention, and I guess it changed a lot of the way I approach teaching and how to develop a safe and secure environment for children. I was often really empathetic to children who had a diagnosed disability or a disability that you could see, whereas children with challenging behaviours was always so much more difficult because you couldn't identify an underlying cause. I think what I took from that was that I was able to provide an environment that was conducive to learning because I treated all children the same, and I became empathetic, and this resulted in a much calmer classroom when we took that approach. So that's the first thing. But I think also the most important thing for educators to do is understand the child and understand their experiences and what they've been through, and validating that for children, because I think that they often feel like no one understands them. With this understanding, you'll get better outcomes for children, and you can also support them in the healing and recovery process. By developing compassion and patience and empathy for Tom, we were able to assist him with his outbursts and ourselves remain calmer in the situation. We also created a quiet space for Tom to go to when he felt like he needed to, and a teacher would often go with him to this space to help regulate his emotions and behaviours. Obviously this was utilised by all the other children in the room as well, not just for Tom. And also we provided a range of experiences that help children express their particular behaviours, whether this was to cope with frustration or express their feelings. And traumatised children benefit from being engaged in activities that are rhythmic and repetitive. And so these experiences were always taken into consideration when developing the learning environment. Also a really important part of creating a safe environment was also clear and consistent rules and boundaries, which we developed with input from the class. So the class rules were always done in consultation with the children. These were displayed visually for the children in the room for both children and teachers to refer to when needed and required. And we used positive reinforcement and redirection when needed as well to help support move from one activity to another, or when you could see that things might have escalated with Tom's behaviour. As Tom was prone to aggressive behaviours and outbursts, I utilised an assessment tool which is a behavioural assessment tool, and this is where you track children's behaviour throughout the day. It's taken over 5 days, and you observe their emotional state throughout certain times of the day. This then helps you to identify triggers. By utilising this assessment, we were able to predict his triggers and put a plan around the behaviours if they occurred in the future. And this was really beneficial for when he did have outbursts, because we were able to all know what we were to do when this occurred. There was a plan, so that was obviously beneficial for Tom. And also Tom was involved in the plan, so he knew exactly what was going to happen when he had an outburst, because often children who are traumatised are out of control. They have lost all sense of ability to be in that environment, and so this really helped him to know what was happening to him. So this involved taking him to a quiet place and removing him from his peers if that's what he needed, and he was aware that this was going to happen, and a teacher always assisted and went with him to that environment and to that space and talked to him and regulated his emotions. Instead of using behaviour management strategies with Tom, I worked on building a relationship with him, and I guess for traumatised children it is about that healing relationship, and so obviously that involved having a physical presence with him when outbursts were likely to occur. So not just when they occurred, but also when they were likely to occur, which we identified through the planned assessment that we did. And I think a really important thing for me was to regulate my own emotions and my own reactions to his behaviour, and this took some training, because obviously when children are a little bit out of control, we sometimes become a little bit out of control ourselves. And so I think it's really important to acknowledge that in yourself and sometimes walk away. And that's something that we had an understanding with in our room, was that when behaviours became out of control and I needed to take a breath, my colleague would take over, and I would walk away, regain, compose myself, and then come back and continue the interaction. Because obviously it's a lot more meaningful for children for you to stay in control and not re-traumatise them. So this is a really good practice that we put in place. I would use language to help him comply with my requests instead of telling him what to do. So this involved asking questions like, Tom, I can see that you need help with that. And then I would help him to do that instead of saying you need to do this. It's just about rephrasing the way you say things for children so that they can achieve and succeed in what you're asking them to do. Tom also benefited from structure and consistency in his day, and I used a program called the Board Maker program, and this was a visual routine that you can develop with this program. And this was discussed with Tom at the beginning of every day, so he knew exactly what was happening throughout his day. And also at the morning group time that we had, we would discuss this with the children as well, with the rest of the group. I also had a finish box, so at the end of every activity we would take the picture card down and put it in the finish box, which also helps children who have autism. And it's about explaining that activity is over and we move on to the next one. And this was really beneficial for Tom and the rest of the children, because like adults, we all like to know what's going to happen next. So when Tom displayed unacceptable behaviour, I would ensure that I used a natural consequence and that there was clear direction around what I expected of him. So when deciding consequence for Tom's behaviour, it was important not to use time out. I think we call it time in instead of time out, as time out often replicates rejection for traumatised children, which is what they experience a lot in their life, especially abuse-related trauma. Tom needed to feel in control of his behaviour, and this would often result in oppositional behaviour. For example, if I asked him to put a jacket on, he would refuse to, or if I asked him to pack away an activity, again, he would continue on with the activity. So in this instance, I would give him choices, but still getting the desired outcome. So for example, I would say, you can wear your jacket outside, or you can take it out with you. Or you can pack away your toys now, or you can pack it up when the children are outside. So just giving him that choice, but it's still an outcome that obviously we want for him to continue on with the activity or the routine without being disruptive to the others in the room. Tom also had low self-esteem, and so when I used positive reinforcement, it was really important to think about the statements that I used with him. So instead of using internal statements, I would direct it at the behaviour. So it would be about, thank you, Tom, for playing so nicely with Sam today, instead of you are a good boy for playing with Sam today. So just about rephrasing those statements, because a lot of children who have been traumatised don't believe they're good at anything. So obviously the first thing we did was we had a plan in place already for the outburst, which everyone was aware of, and so was Tom. When an outburst did occur, we ensured the safety of everyone around. His outbursts involved tantrums and spitting and biting, as I explained before. And so it was really important that everyone remained safe, including the other children, Tom and the carers. So sometimes this involved moving Tom away from the area if he was in the state of doing that, which was always assisted by a carer. But at other times when that wasn't at all achievable, we would remove the other children, and we would also remove any objects away from him because his outbursts were really out of control. He would sometimes hit things or hurt himself. So it was really important that we maintained that safety. So that was, I guess, the first thing that we did in an incident. Safety is paramount. So after we had maintained the safety and supported Tom to calm down if it was in a quiet space or just in the space that he was with the carer, we would then talk him through the incident. So in a narrative that he agreed on and I agreed on. So we recalled the events of what had happened and tried to get him to understand how it impacted on the other people around him, the other children, the carers around him. And we didn't ever get into arguments with him. So if he was saying, oh no, it was this child's fault, or no, I didn't do that, it was always about changing the story, still within what happened, but to suit him as well. Because it's not about having an argument, it is really just about getting the facts of what had happened and getting him to understand what had happened. So after we had this discussion, there was always a consequence, and again it was a natural consequence. So for example, if he hurt a child, then he needed to apologise or make up with them in some way, so it might have been helping the child. Or if he made a mess, then he needed to clean it up. So there was always that natural consequence. It was nothing that was completely not related to what had happened. It was always around the incident. We would also help Tom to reintegrate back into the group. So this is really important because obviously there's some stigma around his outbursts and the children become frightened of him. So this usually involved a discussion with the children and with Tom, and getting them to understand things from his side and getting him to understand things from their side was really important, especially after extreme outbursts where other children might have been hurt. At the end of the day, we would have a debrief and we would review the plan and decide whether we needed to change any of the actions that were decided on in the beginning. And at the beginning it was starting to be, every second day. But by doing this over time and implementing the plan and everyone being collaborative about that, his incidences of outbursts reduced, and we were able to use more preventative approaches, so positive reinforcement, positive redirection, and helping him to engage back with the activities by being a supportive adult next to him, instead of getting to a point where their outbursts were out of control and everything was a little bit heightened and in a bit of a flurry. So I guess having that planned approach really supported him in his environment. Take a breath and remember that we all have challenging behaviours for children, and just to remain calm and be collaborative with everyone involved in the child's life. That is probably the most important, because you've got carers at home that are probably going through the exact same thing that you are in the classroom, so getting them on board is really important as well. And any other professionals that may be working with the child, especially traumatised children, it's really important to get them on board as well and be involved in that. So I believe this work is very rewarding. As teachers and educators, we have a great ability to make a difference in children's lives. So I think that's really important to remember, that when things are getting a little bit out of control and we wonder why we are doing what we're doing, we can always be a small part of that child's life that is positive.